Good evening, everybody. It's now 7 o'clock on October 24th, 2019. I'm Dr. Frank McMillan, Chairman of the North Andover Board of Health, and I will now call the meeting to order. The meeting is now in session. The next item on the business agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. The minutes have been previously distributed. Are there any corrections?
They've been critiqued, and I make a motion that they are approved.
I second.
It's been moved and second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The meeting minutes are approved. We'll move to our next item, the public hearing, which is a continuation of proposed amendments to regulating the sale and use of tobacco and nicotine delivery products. Have a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Second. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of opening the public meeting?
Aye.
The meeting is now open. The microphone is open for testimony. We're going to observe the same rules that we observed the last time. 2 times the mic, 3 minutes per testifier. If anybody wishes to speak, please identify yourself, and if you are representing an organization, who you represent.
Members of the board. My name is Michael Brang. When I was here at your last meeting, I represent the Coalition for Responsible Retailing. And I wanted to make a few points that I didn't have a chance to get across last month. I submitted in between the 2 meetings an affidavit by Dr. Michael Siegel, who is an expert and actually for 30 years an anti-tobacco activist, who is now working against the type of regulations that you are considering. The affidavit was submitted in a lawsuit that was filed by local store owners in Somerville to prevent these types of regulations from going into place. I'm going to I'd encourage you to read that affidavit and allow Dr. Siegel, who's a well-respected physician, to address the health concerns. I think the board is facing 2 very serious issues right now. Youth vaping, and also more recently reports of vaping-related illness in the state, which ultimately led to the ban that's currently in place. And understandably is seeking to address these concerns. I would simply suggest that the regulations that you are considering do nothing to address the concerns that the board is faced with. As I stated last time, the local FDA compliance checks show a 97% compliance rate with your local stores. They are effective at preventing sales to minors. The board's goal is to prevent sales to minors. That is the exact same goal that your local store owners have. I represent the Coalition for Responsible Retailing. I don't know if I mentioned that, which is a coalition of small business owners, such as your local store owners here. Last time the FDA data was called into question, I've submitted that to you. But I don't see how you can question the only available data as to your local store's compliance rate. I think it's just ridiculous to speculate that it's somehow inaccurate data because of how these compliance checks, the only compliance checks we have, are conducted. And I think if the compliance rate was 40%, I don't think that that number would be questioned. I think it would be demonstrated to show that your stores aren't doing what they should be. Your local store owners are the innocent bystanders here, who are not the ones that are responsible for creating these issues that you're facing. I know the Attorney General is taking action to address online sales. There was problems with that. But where there's a 97% compliance rate during the time period where these statistics of youth tobacco use have shown these massive increases, it only stands to reason that your local store owners are not the ones responsible.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay. So I would simply suggest, and I would like to, is that my first 3 minutes? For this round, I guess I'd suggest my main point would be, instead of doing this, instead of moving sales away from your tested store owners and local business owners to some non-existent invention of a new store that's untested, why not work with them on things that will actually address this problem, such as point-of-sale systems or product limitations on the amount of sales that, if in fact I'll leave it at that, and I'd like to speak again if possible, but thank you for the 3 minutes.
Anybody else would like to address the board? Please.
Thank you, Cheryl Sabara from the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards. I'm not going to repeat everything that I said the last time I was here, but I just want to correct a statement that was just made. Your goal, from my understanding, is not just to prevent sales, but to prevent youth from the marketing strategies that are used in some of these stores, as well as to prevent sales. And I went through the statistics of how many kids actually get products from brick and mortar stores, and it's way more, it's about 33%, way more than the FDA checks would indicate. But the real reason I'm up here is to give you a article that was just published today, which is entitled "Short-Term Impact of a Flavored Tobacco Restriction, Changes in Youth Tobacco Use in a Massachusetts Community," and it actually compared Lowell, Massachusetts to Malden, Massachusetts. Lowell has a restriction on flavored tobacco products to just adult-only retail tobacco stores, and Malden does not, and they're very similar geographically, income-wise. And they were also, and this is a study that was done by the Department of Public Health, and they controlled for all factors. And the conclusion is that policies that restrict the sale of flavored tobacco have the potential to curb youth tobacco use in as few as 6 months. And I'll just leave this study with you, but it was reported on CNN as well earlier. I think it was yesterday.
Thank you.
It was reported on CNN. And the tobacco control director from Lowell was quoted from.
This is the American Journal of Preventative Medicine.
Yes.
Thank you. Just let me reset my timer. Give me a second here. Okay, just please introduce yourself.
Helen Picard, 447 Waverly Road. I serve as a school committee member, but I'm not here in that official capacity. But I do want to let you know, I am not a public health person, but I did have a constituent approach me since the last time this board met and talked to me about how tobacco primes the brain for addictions to all sorts of substances. So I did look this up, and I did find that there was a study on the National Institute of Health and a number of other studies out there that do say that nicotine products, I shouldn't say tobacco, but nicotine products prime the brain for all addictions. And we know that there's crises with opioid addictions and other things. So our community, people in town, are talking to each other about their concerns of young people being seduced by marketing strategies, and that when they do try nicotine and become addicted to it, that makes them more vulnerable to all addictions. So again, I want to support this process that you're having. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ron Beauregard, Healthy Communities Tobacco Control Program. I wasn't going to provide any testimony or input at the hearing because I've been working with Brian all along, in terms of my contract with the state to help on technical advice. But when I heard that the regs do nothing to address the concerns, I echo Cheryl Sabara's comments that the new article that you received actually makes the point of saying that restrictions matter. And of course, there hasn't been any question that menthol, wintergreen, or mint are flavors. The board may recall that one of the major reasons why we didn't adopt that as a part of the restriction was due to some potential legal fallout. So we kind of kept it that way. The other thing I wanted to address is the compliance check data. Most of the time when I go to hearings, those trying to tout the very strict adherence to the regulations tend to use very small sample sizes. The sample size that they're using in regard to saying there's a 97% compliance rate is based on 34 checks, only 34 checks over a course of less than 2 years. It's never my way of maligning the retail community. As Joe and the other members know, I've always supported through education and think they do overall a very good job. But I can submit my own records in regard to the compliance checks that the Board of Health program does as opposed to the FDA. And I just took, actually looked at checks from July 1st, 2014 through September 30th, 2019, with a little bit larger sample size of 97 compliance checks, which resulted in 11 sales, which is an 11% non-compliance rate, so as opposed to 3. This isn't in any way, shape, or form to say that the retailers don't do a fine job here in North Andover, and they work hard to try. It's generally a negligent act, not an intentional act. But this is something that I think needs to be called out in regards to a discrepancy between the data that's provided to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Please come on up. Just introduce yourself.
Ashley Hall, Program Manager of the Northeast Tobacco-Free Community Partnership that serves North Andover. And I, again, just want to echo what Cheryl was saying and reply to the first testimony that was made that, yes, part of the goal is to prevent sales from minors, but also we want to make sure they aren't exposed. Any youth who are exposed, what we know is that youth who are exposed to tobacco industry tactics at a young age, if they shop at a store that sells tobacco or advertises tobacco 2 or more times a week, so your gas stations, your grocery stores, they're 4 times more likely to become lifelong tobacco and nicotine users, just by simply seeing it. So with this regulation of putting these products and the advertisements in adult-only stores, that right there decreases the effect that the tobacco industry has on our youth whose brains are undeveloped. And we don't want to teach them at a young age that tobacco is normal, nicotine addiction is normal. We want to prohibit that from happening in the first place.
Thank you. Just as a
Should I s-
formality, just reintroduce yourself, please.
Sure.
for the-
Michael
for the
Brangwyn
minutes.
again for the Coalition for Responsible Retailing. Thank you again. So a few points that I wanted to make, actually maybe it makes sense to do it in this order. The 30% data about brick and mortar purchases, I believe that that's a national statistic. Massachusetts. We're talking about Concord. North Andover. I was in Concord the other night. This is the North Andover Board of Health. Why are we considering anything but the local statistics, which I don't have the local statistics that it sounds like you've done yourself, but even they show a 90% compliance rate. So if we're talking about your local stores, your youth, then we should be considering those statistics.
I think you just told us it was 89%.
89%. So I haven't seen those statistics, and I'm unable, without just hearing that that's what they are, to verify that.
We've
But
been working with Ron for decades, maybe?
I'm not
Decades.
questioning the statistics. Without seeing them, I don't know what the actual violation was, whether it was a sale to a youth or something else. But regardless of the fact, your stores have proven either way, I would suggest, highly effective. And these are compliance checks. So if a youth has a 9 out of 10 chance, according to the compliance checks, of going into a store and buying without an ID, is that how they're likely to go in? And are they just going into 10 stores and hoping on the 10th that they're going to buy a pack of cigarettes? These are compliance checks. So I would suggest that they're not the problem here. And if your concern is other than youth purchases, if it's youth purchases, great. Have your stores implement point of sale ID checks to prevent against sales with fake identification. Have stricter enforcement mechanisms for a rogue employee that negligently or carelessly sells to a minor, instant firing offense. Anything that will actually address the problem. If the other concern is that they're seeing cigarettes and advertisements, then put them somewhere where they won't see them. The stores would agree to all of these things in order to continue selling to adults. Tobacco, no one's going to tell you tobacco or nicotine is a good thing, but there are adults that in your community that purchase it. Your stores have been selling it to them for decades, and now all of a sudden, there's these two very concerning issues, and I'm not discounting what you are dealing with right now. But the response is then to take from these stores this source of essentially If we take this stream of income and the market basket that comes with it out of their hands and move those customers to the next town over that doesn't have these restrictions, they'll go out of business. It's as simple as that. They'll lose the customers. It's a matter of where you shop for convenience, and if they lose that, that's why they're fighting so hard against this, because they feel, the local stores feel like this is such an important part, sales to adults, and where they're not the parties responsible, and there's some actual rational, reasonable things that they could work with you and be your allies to stop this problem, whatever problems you're trying to address. Why can't we do that rather than what's being proposed? Thank you again.
Thank you for your
I actually have a
comments.
couple of follow-up questions for you. What is the statistics of adult patients that come into the stores of North Andover that are looking for flavors particularly, not wintergreen menthol, that are actively using for smoking cessation only?
Well, I would direct you to Dr. Siegel's affidavit with respect to the medicine behind it, because I'm not a doctor. Like I said, he's a tobacco advocate, but he specifically says, and the reason mint, menthol, and wintergreen were specifically accepted from the flavor ban, I haven't seen that report that was just submitted. I would question whether the comparison was between a flavor ban of cherry and unicorn kisses and all of these flavors that were out there before they were actually banned. No one's saying that was a bad idea. That's great, but
Including fruit candy and menthol.
fruit, candy, and menthol. So I think that includes the flavors.
menthol.
Okay, but I'm saying if you're comparing, you need to compare apples to oranges. If you're comparing a place with a flavor ban of all flavors and then no flavor ban where you have either combustibles and traditional flavors or then unicorn kisses, that's not what we're talking about here. You already have a ban on the flavors like fruit and creme brulee and all of those crazy things. So just with respect to mint, menthol, and wintergreen, those have been kind of associated with tobacco products for much longer than vaping ever existed. And the adult users that maybe smoked Newport cigarettes that switched to a non-combustible menthol product and are now going to be in a position where they go to their local convenience store and it's Marlboros or go to the store down the street, they're going to be, I think, Dr. Siegel sets forth the argument better than I'm doing right now, but the FDA specifically warned against a situation where adults using these products for smoking cessation are then in a position where they're essentially encouraged to go back to using combustible products.
One other question. Since the statewide ban, has any convenience store in North Andover gone out of business because they are not selling any vape products?
I don't think that there has been, but that's one piece of what you're considering tonight. And honestly, I would suggest.
Well, that's a global ban, so that's even stricter.
But what's not included in the statewide ban is mint, menthol, and wintergreen. So really, but what your regulations would include that the state ban does not is mint, Skoal, for example, Newport cigarettes, tobacco products that are traditionally used and have been used for decades by adult tobacco users that have the right, if they want to have a Newport cigarette or mint Skoal, to purchase it in a local store. And that is another key part of, so you can't say, well, they're not going to go out of business because they're already not selling vaping products. It's more than the vaping products. And quite frankly, the mint, menthol, and wintergreen is the more important aspect of it to a lot of these store owners because that is such a key piece of their revenue. And that's the distinguishing characteristic where adults say, I'm not going to buy a plain, whatever you call a regular cigarette. I'm going to go somewhere else to get my Newport or my menthol-flavored Juul.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Just come up to a microphone, please.
Really important. I have read Dr. Siegel's affidavit, and I think what's important to distinguish, and the elephant in the room was finally enunciated at the last couple of sentences, Newport cigarettes. I mean, they are the second largest brand in the country, and it's touted as such by the R.J. Reynolds. So that is the real pinch. That's the tough one. Dr. Siegel is in no way, shape, or form going to argue that we should benefit from mint, menthol, or wintergreen in the form of cigarettes, or frankly, even in chew. So I think that's just important to distinguish. I think there was some testimony just mentioned about these have been traditional flavors, mint, menthol, and wintergreen. Well, vape hasn't been long enough to be traditional. This goes back since 1957. Lorelei launched Newports in 1957, and it sure has been a traditional flavor. Unfortunately, a traditional flavor to help suppress a cough, make the smoke less harsh, and to keep addiction strong and getting off the cigarettes difficult. So I just wanted to make that distinguishing factor in regard to the Dr. Siegel's. He's not in any way, shape, or form promoting cigarettes. He's doing just the opposite.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to next invite some commentary from Brian just to, I'm sorry. Cheryl, please, come on back.
I really didn't want to do this, but I just have to. There was a suggestion made that retailers could just agree to put these products somewhere where they're not seen. My brother, I don't know whether he knows this or not, but his own colleague from his own law firm said that that could not be done because of the First Amendment right to commercial free speech that the industry has. And the industry would sue in a second if retailers agreed to put these products somewhere where no one can see them. I'll just leave it at that. I have a lot more I can say, but I'm not going to.
Could I just respond since that was directed?
I'm going to ask a question of Brian. Did our old regulation before the pharmacies agreed to pull them out, didn't our old regulations say that pharmacies could sell cigarettes as long as they were kept out of plain sight?
I think they had to be behind the counter.
They had to be behind the counter. That was what it was.
Yeah.
You,
If my memory of it, I pull up the order, is that it was a recommendation.
right.
I remember Dr. Trowbridge mentioned
Thank
it was
you.
a recommendation, and we got some good faith compliance.
So we didn't enact it as a regulation, but we kind of recommended.
Correct. It was a recommendation within the regulation, but it was clear the language was a recommendation.
And it wasn't, okay. Good point. You wanted to rebut something?
Just on the, what was directed at my fellow attorney at my firm. I don't know who that was, or I can't speak to when that was said. Okay. I don't know. All I can tell you is what the current position of the Coalition for Responsible Retailers and the stores they represent is. I mean, I understand that perhaps Attorney Foss was making a point that there is commercial speech under the Constitution, and there are limitations on how that can be addressed. I'm telling you what the store owners have told to us, and I don't know if it was after this hearing, but they are willing to consider any and all of the things that I mentioned, rather than simply creating a new store that doesn't exist in a lot of communities. I don't know if you have any of these adult-only stores in North Andover, but oftentimes it's an untested, there's going to be a new person that hasn't even ever held a tobacco permit before, that we're then going to say, oh, we entrust you with the right to do this, even though you're store owners that have been doing it for decades with a 97% or 90% at least compliance rate. They're done. I didn't, sorry, I went a little bit over what I was meant to address, but
Okay.
I'm telling you that store owners are willing to work with you, including that, setting the
Okay.
products aside.
Seeing everybody's had a chance to have their say, I'm going to ask Brian just to go over, just to highlight some of the changes that we made as a result of our last
Yep.
meeting.
Okay.
We can have a discussion amongst the board members.
Okay. Before I do that, just a couple of things to talk about what Brian's been talking about regarding store owners and things like that. A lot of the times, the workers that they hire actually do the sales, not the owners of the stores themselves. We've tried training, we've tried mandating, cart-out policies, we've tried everything. We only do one compliance check per year per establishment, and we're still getting fails. We've got some establishments that fail 3 times in a row. That's 3 sales over 3 years being checked 3 times. In that case, we obviously have to take additional steps beyond that, but someone failed 2 in a row, 3 times in a row, sporadic sales here and there, so it's an ongoing problem. No matter how much education we try to do, no matter how many compliance checks we try to do, they're still getting caught selling. So if we catch 1 a year, how many sales do they actually sell throughout that entire calendar year? Probably a lot more than once. So it's getting out there, kids are buying it. It's happening, we know it's happening. It's just, we can't keep up with it. So, after that, we did talk about the revisions. Last meeting, we talked about a few different things. I put in your packets a clean copy of the draft regulations with things that are highlighted that we talked about, and I went ahead and revised over this past month. So I gave you a synopsis sheet, and I gave you regulations with highlights on there. Section 1, statement of purpose, was completely added in with information that Cheryl had submitted to the board. On page 2, I added in a highlighted number here, whereas, as the number of tobacco retail establishments permit holders declined over the past year from 20 to 15. On the request of Suzanne, Town Council, regarding a regulation you guys wanted to do in terms of a overall cap. She just wanted a basis as to why we're implementing the cap and the rationale behind the numbers that we chose. So last year we had 20, now we have 15. We do have another application in for an adult-only retail tobacco establishment. So right now we have a total of 16, and that's reflected in the regulations later on.
Brian, when was that adult-only retail tobacco establishment permit applied for?
A couple months ago. He came in 3 or 4 months ago, talked about it, talked about the regulations, what we had on the books, what was currently in place, and what the outlook was moving down the road. He also had a technical review committee meeting with the town about a month and a half ago, with planning, building, conservation, health, zoning, just in regards of what he would need to do to get a store up and running. He did actually sign a lease and did apply for his permit, so he technically has a permit as of right now. He just doesn't have a store that's open to actually use the permit. So we've got 16 total at this point. All right, so
Was there such a drop from 20 to 15? Any
all the
particular-
pharmacies stopped selling.
Ah, there we go.
So we lost a bunch right there. And then I think the Vineyard moved to Stop and Shop.
Yes.
And they stopped selling when they moved to the new location. So going on to the section number 2, definitions. We added in the adult-only retail tobacco establishment definition. This whole definition is new. We did discuss it last time, but it does give you the criteria as to what the store would be and what they'd be allowed to sell. We did go through and revise all the numbers, all the titles and headings, just to coincide with the additions so that everything flows and is numbered properly. We added in a retail establishment definition on page 5. This is new. This was, it was a tobacco retail establishment, but we have the tobacco product sales permit now, which is also new. So the retail establishment is basically any retail establishment in town that does any type of sales. So convenience stores, gas stations, department stores, things like that. Any place that does any type of retail sales, even hair salons and tanning salons that sell product. On page 6, tobacco product definition was updated. Tobacco product sales permit was actually included, and this is new. So it's basically a permit issued by the Board of Health upon application in accordance with Section 4 of these regulations. Approval of tobacco sales permit is required by any retail establishment or adult-only tobacco retail establishment to sell any tobacco product in North Andover. Pretty straightforward. Vaping products was also included as a new definition, and this was based off of the state's definition they came out with the governor's emergency order and the commissioner's declaration and then emergency order. Going through onto page 8, this section was basically section 4. This is where we added in the adult-only retail tobacco establishment criteria. So to apply for a permit, these are the criteria that they have to meet. 21 of age and older, doesn't sell food, drinks, alcohol, lottery. Nobody under the age of 21 can go in there. And then it will not be located within 500 feet of an existing retailer, and has to hold all necessary permits by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And then the next sections, 4.13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, are all new. And this is the cap that we talked about. Cap of 16, a cap of 1 for adult-only tobacco sales permits, and then the distances and setbacks from these retailers to 500 feet to a public or private elementary school or secondary school, 500 feet to a new retailer. And then the clause where in existing business that sells, the new business owner has 60 days to apply for tobacco retail permit under that same existing business. And then on page 10, section 8, we just revised the number and the letters. We broke it up instead of a paragraph form. It's got an A, B, a C, all from the existing definition. Section 9, on page 11, B is new, section B. And that's pursuant to the governor's September 24th public health emergency order. No permit holder shall sell liquid nicotine containers. And then goes on up until the restriction is removed. And once that's removed and the public health emergency has been resolved, the prohibition ends thereafter. Permit holder who sells liquid nicotine containers must also comply with 310 CMR 30, which I'm not familiar with and I don't have that handy right now. That is what Suzanne put in here. I think it's just a way of handling liquid nicotine because it is dangerous and it can expire, and if it's not in childproof containers, then it can get into the wrong hands, things like that. So that's where that comes from, and that's new. Section 13 on page 12 just reflects the state law as amended where no healthcare institutions can sell tobacco. Same thing with section 14, and that's educational institutions. Section 15, and this is what you guys debated last time. And I added this in here on what I thought you guys wanted. This is sale of electronic cigarettes prohibited. It says inconsistent with the governor's September 24th declaration, no person shall sell, distribute, or cause to be sold or distributed any vaping products as defined herein. If the public health emergency ban has been deemed to be resolved or rescinded, the sale of electronic cigarettes and all vaping products or accessories will be restricted to adult-only tobacco retail establishments. If you guys want me to amend that or change that in any way, let me know, and I can strike that and give you guys a revised draft. Or we can adopt it as amended. But that's what I think we guys did make any final determination last meeting.
So this is not just flavors, but it's all electronic devices.
Yeah.
Would be restricted to a tobacco-only
Yep.
store that has restricted access.
Correct.
Understood, okay. Please continue.
Section 16, this is a new section added in, which basically mimics the state laws. It references Mass General Law, Chapter 270, Sections 21 and 22, about not allowing smoking in the workplace, not allowing smoking in adult-only retail tobacco stores, smoking bar, outdoor spaces, and restaurants. And we added in a specific clause here to go a little bit beyond the state law, saying within 25 feet of a building entrance or enclosed space where smoking is prohibited. We've been getting complaints outside office buildings where people stand right outside the front door and have cigarettes at lunch and people have to walk in and out. So the state law basically states that any entrance where smoke is being taken inside, that's technically a violation of the smoke-free workplace law. I just wanted to give it a more concrete number and say 25 feet. Because we get calls. How far do they have to be? Well, far enough where it doesn't come into the building. Well, we have to walk through it anyway. So I said, you know what? I think this is a pretty fair and reasonable distance. Not off property, not down the street, not half a mile away, about 25 feet.
Okay.
And then added in the use of e-cigarettes or any vaping product is prohibited where smoking is prohibited in reference to the Mass General laws. Section 17, we went through and I just updated and increased the fines for first violation and second violation. It was 100, 200, then 300. We just made them all 300. So first, second, and third are all $300 fines, as well as the existing suspensions if necessary for 7 days for second violation and 30 days for a third violation. And then section 18, we changed numbers around a little bit. This is a new section, but basically this is violations of the regulations. it gives the board authority and agent's authority to give anybody a fine who violates these regulations in terms of smoking in public. So somebody smoking on school property can be issued a fine. Somebody smoking in a football game can get a fine of $25. And then I went through, and just all the numbers changed. For 19, sections 20 and 21 are reserved for future amendments. Severability, and then section 23 is a previous regulation is superseded. And then effective date, and the regulation was adopted on date, and then a signature page. At the end is all of the footnotes that coincide with the whereases in the beginning of the regulation. And that's it.
Is there anybody on the board who would like to just extract any one of these items for further discussion, amendment, or removal? So I will take that as that nobody wishes to discuss any item further. It sounds like we've discussed all of these. At this point, I would entertain a motion to adopt the, what are we calling these?
Revised regulations?
These revisions.
Yes.
So we will discuss them in a package. So I'd look for a motion to accept the revisions as presented.
Make a motion to accept the revisions as presented
Is there a
for the
second? Is
sale and use of tobacco products.
I will second that motion.
there any further discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The ayes have it, it's unanimous. The revisions are adopted, the regulation will be updated. The adoption date will be tonight, and the effective date will be January 1st, 2020. If there's no further discussion on this item, I'm going to close the public meeting. There being no objection, the meeting is now closed. We will move on to other items of business. Next item is old business. Brian, what do we have?
Well, for old business, we don't have anything. This was the old business, thank God.
Okay.
Future meetings, we are looking to do body art, which we have discussed before. We've got a lot of things that have been written out and worked on over the past several months. Steve's been doing a great job on that. So we've got the body art regulations coming up, probably at the next meeting or the meeting after, as well as our food protection program. Like I said, we've been working on this for a while now, a good year and a half. But we've revised all of the plan review guides, all the permit categories, and have done a whole lot of work on this. It's ready to go. We are all set. I'd like to thank Cheryl and Ron and everybody. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate your time and testimony.
Nobody wants to stay for the mosquito update?
Mosquito update is next.
All right, let's hear the mosquito update.
All right, so I put in your packets a little press release that I worked on with the school department. I met with mosquito control. We met with the state, DPH, and Melissa Brown, Dr. Melissa Brown, and had a long seminar and lessons learned, all the hot topics of mosquitoes and AAA. But basically, we had a really serious year. It's one of the worst in history for cases, positive tests, and human and other mammal cases. So I think that this dates back to the 40s with the severity of it, in terms of the number of actual human cases. It's cyclical, so it comes and goes, but it usually comes for a few years. So they're anticipating it will be like this again next year. So I'm going to be working diligently over the winter to get all the IPM plans for all the schools updated, make sure they're going to incorporate any new spraying techniques or products they're going to be using. They're looking at a barrier spray that will actually last 6 or more weeks, which the current product lasts only 3. So we're going to be doubling the efficacy of that particular product, which I think would be really good. So on that note, temperatures have been dropping, mosquito activity is declining. Mosquitoes do not fly if it's 50 degrees or below. Their central nervous system can't handle it. They stay in their nests and hibernate in their hummocks and hidden spaces, and they go to hibernate after the first hard frost. But if it's during the day and it's 50 degrees or above, there still could be some activity. It's low in the 50s, but lately it's been kind of nice out. Yesterday it was 60-something degrees. So during the day and in the woods and trails, you will have some activity. Lower risk, lower activity, but there's still a risk. So basically, we got that information out there. Wanted to let everybody know that the recommendation on limiting outdoor activities at night has been rescinded because of the lower temperatures. Even if it's 60 degrees during the day, by the time you get to dusk, it's in the lower 50s, and the threat level is lower, but we still want to instill upon people personal protection and common sense. If mosquitoes are active, then wear bug spray. It's as simple as that. But that being said, I talked to the schools, talked to mosquito control. Everybody's on board with the recommendation of allowing nighttime activities again, and just making people be aware that there is still a slight risk and to take various precautions.
Now, that risk is primarily Tripoli.
Yep. Yep. So,
I think it would be a good idea in the spring and early summer next year to make sure that we start education early, since it's already
Yep.
predicting it's gonna be a bad year next year.
and that's what they think. I mean, he's a fortune teller, but history has had it come in cycles. West Nile will be prevalent for a few years, and they'll die off. Then Tripoli's prevalent for a few years, then it dies off and kind of goes around and around again. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. And we already talked about some springtime meetings, some springtime public education.
Historically, we've kind of had that discussion in February or March.
Yep.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that one of your first meetings?
Passionate mosquito talks.
Yes, we have that talk. We've had that talk every
Yeah.
year I've been here.
Yep.
Which is like going on 13 now.
Oh,
So you know everything about mosquitoes. But yeah, I'm happy that temperatures are getting lower at night, so it does reduce the activity and the threat. Halloween, it's predicted is going to be a high of 51 during the day, so I'm assuming by dusk it's not going to be an issue at all. I know the parents are extremely happy that we aren't cutting into their work day to have trick-or-treating and causing problems, but I think for us, as a safety issue, I think we did the right thing by limiting activities,
Recommending limiting activities.
recommending
We
people
didn't-
limit,
We
correct.
didn't ban anybody from doing anything.
No, we did not, we recommended. And they listened to the recommendation, which is good. But, yeah, I think we did the right thing. I know it upset a lot of people at the beginning, but I think it was definitely the safer way to go. And I think now, the threat is very, very minimal at this point.
Very good. And trick-or-treating is from 5:30 to 7:30, and that is determined by the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
Good. I think we're just about ready to wrap up. Anything left to discuss?
I think that is it. I think we're doing pretty good.
All right. If there is a motion to adjourn, I will entertain it.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. We are adjourned.
Yes.